Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and I know you have been waiting for this for ages, but today we finally get back into the 911 and start assembling the engine. Alright guys, so for those of you who are new here, I'll just give you a little bit of the background on this car. So this is the car that I started my channel on almost 4 years ago now. I started building this car, and I went like a bull at a gate, got 99% of it done of the car, and then I started work on the engine, and I actually ended up sending my junk engine over to Los Angeles to Performance Development, and Neil has helped me out no end over there, developing new hot rod parts for this engine and just repairing what was there. I recommend you go back. I'll put a link to the playlist here and go back and have a look at some of these, exactly what was done to this engine, because whoever rebuilt it before we got hold of it just absolutely butchered it, did some criminal stuff. But anyway, we went through, Neil's gone through and repaired all of that, and I went over there and did a lot of machining work and tried to sort of get my head around exactly what goes into building an engine for these things, and I learned a whole heap, and I am super grateful to Neil. So Neil really helped me out, but in helping me out and looking after me, he had lots of fully paid work that had to take priority, and that's just why it's taken so long. And also developing new parts just takes time. So I'll take you through some of the new bits later as I'm assembling it, but yeah, it's not a quick process. In any case, we are going to get back onto this now, and I am going to keep going on this car until it's done. Obviously, I'm going to be doing the Alpha at the same time, so the Ferrari engine sitting here in front of me. But basically, I'll be able to go from one to the other so I can keep momentum going forward. But either way, this is going to be finished. I know lots of you have been giving me heaps about it, but it's going to get finished. So first things first, let's get the block out and mount it onto the engine stand, and then we can actually start putting this engine together. Yeah! Okay, well now I've got the engine mounted on the stand. The first job is to fit the head studs, and I believe these are factory head studs. I've had them for ages and I can't remember what they are, and they're just in a bag, so but either way, it's what Neil recommended. And before we fit them in, I've got to go through, I'm just going to chase all of the case savers. Quick history on this engine if you haven't already seen it. Basically, this is out of my car's 1974, which has a magnesium case. That was when the emissions first came in, and basically they wanted to run them really hot to try and work for emissions, but the trouble is magnesium is soft, and with the heat, the head studs would just pull out, and basically the best repair is to use case savers, not helicoils or time certs, so case savers, which are basically just a really big coarse thread that goes in with the correct thread drilled into the center of it. They hang on properly. This has already been done on this case. I'm just going to go through using my my tap. I'm just going to make sure that they're all nice and clean, get them all ready so that I can put these in. I do have to do a test to get the height right, so I'm going to dummy up one cylinder, and just to put all of these in dry without any Loctite or anything, put the cylinder on, put the head on, and just make sure that I've got enough length in these. Because we've played around with everything, we just need to make sure that the lengths are correct before we button everything up. All right, dry fit up, looks good. It all sits nice and there's plenty of thread there, but it doesn't come too far out. It's all perfect, just the way we need it. So now it's time to pull it apart again, and I can put in the head studs for good. Okay, so head studs are in. So the next thing is to go through and install the crankcase breather and the thermostat. I'm going to go and test the thermostat now. So while I'm here, I'm just cranking up the gas and checking that my thermostat works. And you can see it's already starting to open up there. I'm not sure if the camera's picking that up, but that looks like a working thermostat. And what Mrs. Jeff doesn't know that I'm using the cooktop for this, won't hurt her. And as before, I'm just going to go through and re-tap all the threads just to make sure that everything fits up nicely, and then reinstall the studs into the case. All right, moving along, I've got my oil pressure pistons that I've got to install into the car now. These are the newer type, because this had the oil bypass modification, which is basically it's an upgrade for these early engines. It just gets better oiling, and that's been done to this. So it's got the newer versions of these things. So it's time to install these now. The one goes in there and one goes down under here, I think. So let's start putting these in. Starting with a little bit of assembly lube on the pistons, just so that everything is nice and prepared and ready to go. So the oil pressure release pistons and springs are in and torqued up. I'll just talk quickly about torque wrenches, just mention it again. Those of you who've seen some other engine work, you know that I like redundancy, and I double check. I have two different types here. So these are actually from Supercheap. I've got this digital one which I use to back up my click one. So this one, obviously, this is the typical style where you dial in your amount on the handle and then bring it round until it clicks. That's the typical one that you're used to. But this is a great backup, because this just clips onto a regular ratchet, and then it gives you a digital readout. So I can sort of go through both and just double check and make sure that it's they're all done nicely to spec, and I'm happy. So I'm happy with them. Let's keep moving on. It's very slow, but it's getting there. Oh, and one more thing before I forget, with this style of torque wrench, basically there's a spring inside. You want to make sure every time you finish using it, you wind it back off and leave the pressure off of the spring. Keeps it keeping nice and accurate for much longer. So just a quick tip there. All right, moving on. One of the things that I couldn't do yesterday that I'm going to have to try and track down is this is the oil pressure switch. Basically, this just sends the signal to the light on the dash saying you've got an oil pressure problem. It's supposed to go in right in here. The trouble is that the hole for that is enormous, and this is tiny. It looks like I'm actually missing the fitting that goes between the two. I think it sort of disappeared somewhere between here and LA, but I'm going to have to try and track that piece down, and that will have to be left for now. So moving on. All right, this is the moment that I have been worried about. As many of you would have seen in the previous rebuild videos back in LA at Performance Developments, I busted one of my rings. I got this wafer ring, I overlapped the ends of it, and as such, the rings didn't go in, and I bent the fine oil ring. And yeah, So now I've got it back. I've got the new rings here. I need to now install it into the cylinder. Now I have, I've already gone through, I gapped it and I made sure it was correct, and I've put everything in and made sure there's no overlapping. Now I need to just try and tap it in, and fingers crossed it goes in, because I had so many headaches trying to get these things in. But let's give it a go. Let's see if I can get it in there. First go, please. I don't want to keep doing this. Yes! Yes! Oh, that was a relief. First go, and it's in. Yeah, that feels good. Oh, whew. Oh, this is such a stressful time when I was doing in LA, and the relief of that, because compared to the standard original 911 pistons, they have really big chunky rings. They're not that hard to get in because there's not a big issue. These things are so thin and so fine that any little gap with the mounting tool, and it sort of pops out the edge, and then it sits outside, and if you keep banging it, you'll bend. And yes, so piston is in. Yes, that's a win. Okay, so we finally got to the fun bit, the interesting bit, the scary bit, and that is fitting the pistons and cylinders. So most regular engines, the way you would normally connect up pistons and etc. is you would get your piston, connect it to the rod, and then run the rod through the top of the block like I did with the Datsun. You mount it straight into the block. Because this has separate cylinders, so I've got the base of the piston sticking out, and then I need to rotate the engine so that it's facing a nice direction, and then mount each piston like so, and then put the pin in. That's the way you do it on these. Now, this is going to be interesting. Before I actually do that, the last little point I need to talk about is basically Neil went through, he's done all the calculations on this engine, and depending on what of shims I put on the bottom of each cylinder, and this is a common thing for 911s to get the correct deck height. He's already sorted the deck height. The thing is trying to get the right compression. And for mine, I've originally was thinking of running a much higher compression, but with the shims that he's supplied me, if I go 1.5 mil shim, I can get 11.6 to 1, which is way too high for what I need. 1.75 mil shims is 1.2 to 1, which I could possibly run, and it would probably be okay, particularly with the fuel that we have here in Australia. Our regular fuel is 98 octane, or our sort of premium fuel is 98 octane, which is measured slightly differently to the US. So I believe it's sort of equivalent to like a 95 or a 96 in the US. Either way, so it's good fuel and it's available everywhere. But I'm going to go the conservative way, and I'm going to do the 2 mil shim, and it'll be 10.86 to 1. I think that's a safer bet for this engine. It's going to be a street engine driver every day, so I think keeping it on the safe side. To be honest, the original 2.8 RSR engines ran 10.5 to 1 anyway, so this is still a higher compression. And with my pistons and new cams and all the modern gear that's in my car, I think it'll be. I think it should be a lively little thing. So I need to fit these in while I'm putting the pistons in, and yeah, that should be fun. No! Oh, you idiot. Oh, it's not easy. And I've just stuffed this up. Basically what I've done is I've pulled the piston out of the cylinder, which is not what I wanted to do. So thankfully I've sort of learnt my lesson now with putting these in and out. It shouldn't be that big of a drama, but putting these pins in is a nightmare. Putting the little circlips in for the piston, it is a tough gig. It's not an easy job, and yeah, I'm I'm struggling. They're so tight. It's a challenge. So back to the drawing board. I've got to put this back in the cylinder again and try again. Oh, that was epic. That was much more work than I expected. It's basically taken me 2 full days to get to this stage. So as you can see here, I've just used a socket and one of the nuts just to hold this on so that I can do all of the pistons and cylinders and flip it over without them falling out. That is all I can do in this time. Like, this is taking much longer because I'm really taking my time trying to make sure I'm doing everything right. I don't want to just, I'm not rushing this. This engine is, it's cost me a lot more than the Ferrari engine. So I'm sort of not in any hurry to get this done. I'm just going to do it right. So all right, that is enough for today. Next episode is probably going to be back on the Alpha. So, all right. As always, like, subscribe. If you want to watch the videos a day earlier than everybody else, you can follow me on Patreon, and I often give some little tips and hints on what's going on Instagram and Facebook. So I'll see you there. All right, guys. See you next time.